Human caught alien girl stealing his meal, but her story broke his heart. Steve Lawson wiped sweat from his brow as the alien sun beat down mercilessly on the construction site. The Keldorian Settlement's expansion project had been his home for the past 6 months. Good pay for an ex-Marine willing to work in the ass end of the galaxy. "Break time, people!" 30 minutes, the foreman bellowed. Steve grabbed his lunch pack and headed to his usual spot, a smooth, dome-shaped boulder in the central plaza that caught just enough shade at midday. He settled against it, muscles aching pleasantly from the morning's labor. His sleeveless tactical vest clung to his torso, revealing arms hardened by years of military service and manual labor. He unwrapped his sandwich, real Earth beef, a luxury that cost him half a day's wages but worth every credit, and closed his eyes for just a moment, savoring the first bite. A faint rustling sound made his eyes snap open. Not 3 feet away stood a small alien girl. Her skin was a striking turquoise that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight, contrasting with wild white hair that fell in tangled waves around her delicate face. Large sapphire eyes stared at him with a mixture of fear and desperate hunger. Her pink garments were tattered and stained with the distinctive orange dust of the Keldorian streets. Their eyes locked for one frozen moment. Then she lunged forward, snatched the sandwich from his hand, and bolted. "Hey!" Steve shouted, half rising before stopping himself. The girl was already weaving through the crowded marketplace, disappearing between the stalls. His coworker Dren lumbered over. "What's got you yelling, Lawson?" "Some kid just stole my lunch." Dren's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "One of the street urchins? You want me to call security?" Steve watched the spot where the girl had vanished, something tugging at his conscience. "Nah, let it go. Your call. Those street rats are getting bolder every day. The authorities should round them up." "She's just a kid," Steve said, more sharply than he intended. Dren raised his upper limbs in surrender. "Whoa, easy. Didn't realize you had a soft spot for thieves." Steve shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Just a sandwich." But as he returned to work with an empty stomach, the image of those enormous, frightened eyes stayed with him. 3 days later, Steve was taking a shortcut through one of the settlement's narrow alleyways when he spotted a flash of turquoise and white ducking behind a waste container. Moving with the quiet precision his military training had instilled, he circled around and gently caught a small wrist. "Didn't your parents teach you not to take what isn't yours?" he asked, keeping his voice firm but not harsh. The alien girl froze, then slowly looked up at him, those same sapphire eyes now welled with tears, her small body trembling beneath his grip. I'm sorry," she whispered in surprisingly good English, her voice musical and thin. Steve crouched down to her level. "What's your name?" "Livy," she answered, still shaking. "Where are your parents, Livy?" The tears spilled over. "Gone. The plague took them last season." Steve felt his chest tighten. "You're alone?" She shook her head. "My brother. He's only 3. He's sick and hungry." "And the sandwich wasn't for you," Steve realized aloud. Livy nodded, wiping her eyes with her free hand. "I tried to find work, but no one will hire a Phylaxian child in a Keldorian settlement. We're not welcome here." Steve released her wrist and sat back on his heels, studying her. The girl was thin, too thin, and beneath the dirt, he could see the telltale signs of malnutrition. "Where are you staying?" Livy hesitated, clearly afraid to reveal too much. "I want to help," Steve added softly. "No tricks." "The old communications building," she finally said. "In the attic. No one goes there anymore." Steve nodded. "I'm Steve, and I think we should get some food for you and your brother. Real food, not stolen sandwiches." For the first time, a small smile appeared on Livy's face, transforming her features from merely pretty to heartbreakingly beautiful. "You're not angry about the sandwich?" Steve stood, offering his hand. "Let's just say you owe me one." As they walked toward the market, Steve couldn't explain the protective instinct surging through him. Maybe it was her vulnerability, or maybe it was just that he recognized something in those determined eyes, the will to survive against all odds. Whatever it was, he knew his life had just taken an unexpected turn. The abandoned communications building loomed at the edge of the settlement, its once sleek architecture now weathered and forgotten. Steve followed Livy through a narrow service entrance. carefully navigating the debris-strewn corridors. "We're almost there," Livy whispered, leading him up a rickety staircase. The attic was surprisingly clean, a small space with makeshift bedding in one corner and a collection of scavenged items neatly arranged along the wall. Near the bedding lay a small bundle wrapped in a faded blue blanket. "Taro," Livy called softly. "I brought someone." "A friend." The bundle stirred and a tiny face emerged, the same turquoise skin and white hair as Livy, but with eyes of a deeper, almost violet blue. The child's face was flushed with fever. "He's been sick for 3 days," Livy explained, kneeling beside her brother. "I've been giving him the medicine I could trade for, but it's not helping much." Steve set down the food packages he'd brought and crouched next to the boy. "Hey there, little man. I'm Steve." Taro regarded him with solemn eyes before breaking into a weak smile. "You're pink," he observed in a tiny voice. Steve chuckled. "That I am. And you're blue." "Turquoise," Taro corrected seriously, making Steve laugh. As Livy prepared food for her brother, Steve examined their living conditions more carefully. The space was secure enough, but hardly suitable for children, especially a sick one. "How long have you been here?" he asked. "Almost a full season," Livy replied, helping Taro sit up to eat. "After our parents died, the authorities wanted to separate us. Send Taro to a care facility and me to a labor program." Her voice hardened. "I wouldn't let them take him." Steve nodded, understanding her choice. He'd seen enough care facilities across the galaxy to know they were often little more than holding pens. "Smart move," he said. "But this place isn't great for a sick kid." "We don't have many options. Phylaxians aren't welcome here since the trade dispute. The governor's new policies." She trailed off, looking worried. "What policies?" Livy lowered her voice, though only the three of them were present. "They're conducting population assessments in the residential sectors. Anyone without proper documentation is being deported, or worse." "Worse?" "There are rumors about labor camps in the mining colonies." Her eyes met his, fear evident. "We can't be found, Steve." Before he could respond, a distant sound caught his attention. The distinctive whine of security hovercrafts. "Shit," he muttered, moving to the small window. 3 official vehicles were parked outside the building, and uniformed Keldorian officers were disembarking. "They're here," Livy whispered, clutching Taro protectively. "How did they find us?" "Probably routine sweep," Steve said, mind racing. "This sector was bound to be checked eventually." Taro began to whimper, sensing the tension. Livy hushed him gently, but her own panic was evident. Steve made a quick decision. "Gather only what you absolutely need. We're leaving." "How?" "They're at all the exits." He grinned, the familiar rush of adrenaline sharpening his senses. "Not all of them. I've worked on buildings like this before. There's always a maintenance shaft for the communication arrays." Livy quickly packed a small bag while Steve wrapped Taro in his blanket. The boy felt alarmingly hot against his chest. "This way," Steve whispered, leading them to a service panel he'd spotted earlier. He pried it open to reveal a narrow shaft. "It'll be tight, but it should lead to the roof. From there, we can cross to the adjacent building." The sound of boots on stairs reached them. Livy slipped into the shaft first, and Steve handed Taro to her before squeezing in himself, pulling the panel closed behind them. They climbed in tense silence, the shaft barely wide enough for Steve's broad shoulders. When they finally emerged onto the roof, the alien sun was setting, casting long shadows across the settlement. "There," Steve pointed to a neighboring structure. "That's the supply warehouse for my worksite. I have access." They made it across just as shouts erupted from the communications building, their absence discovered. Inside the warehouse, Steve led them to a small office in the back. "We can stay here tonight. No one comes in after hours." As Livy settled Taro on a makeshift bed of packing materials, Steve realized the enormity of what he'd just done. He was now harboring undocumented aliens, risking his job, his residency permit, possibly even criminal charges. Yet watching Livy tenderly wipe her brother's forehead, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. "Thank you," Livy said softly, looking up at him with those impossible blue eyes. "You didn't have to do this." Steve sat beside her, suddenly aware of how delicate she was despite her fierce protectiveness. "Yeah, well, I've never been great at minding my own business." "Why help us? You barely know us." He considered this, then shrugged. Where I come from, we don't leave kids to fend for themselves. It's just not what humans do. Livy studied him with newfound curiosity. Your species is strange, Steve Lawson. You have no idea, he replied with a half smile, already planning their next move. Taro's condition worsened overnight. His turquoise skin had taken on an alarming bluish tinge, and his breathing came in shallow gasps. He's burning up, Steve said, placing a hand on the boy's forehead. This isn't just any fever. Livy's face crumpled with worry. It's cerulean fever. Our parents died from it. I hoped Taro was too young to catch it. Is there a cure? Yes, but, she hesitated. The treatment requires Phylaxian-specific medicine. It's only available at the Central Medical Facility. Steve frowned. The most heavily guarded building in the settlement? The governor keeps tight control over all medical supplies, Livy explained, especially those for non-Kaldorians. Steve checked his comm unit for the time. The warehouse would be active soon, and they couldn't stay. He made a quick decision. Pack up. I know somewhere safer. 20 minutes later, they arrived at a small apartment in the workers' district. Steve's temporary quarters were sparse but secure. It's not much, he said, but the building supervisor owes me a favor. He won't report us. While Livy settled Taro on the bed, Steve accessed his datapad, searching for information on cerulean fever. What he found wasn't encouraging. Without treatment, how long does he have? He asked quietly. Livy's voice was barely audible. 3 days. Maybe 4. Steve nodded grimly. Then we have no choice. We need to get into that medical facility. It's impossible, Livy protested. The security can be bypassed, Steve interrupted. I need to make a call. He stepped onto the small balcony and connected to a secure channel. After a moment, a gruff voice answered. Lawson? The hell you calling for at this hour? Need a favor, Hendricks. Information on the Central Medical Facility. A pause. You sick or something? Not me. A friend. This have anything to do with those missing Phylaxian kids they're hunting? Steve tensed. What do you know about that? Settlement's buzzing with it. Governor Threll himself issued the order. Word is they're carrying some contagion. That's bull. The boy's sick, but it's not contagious to Kaldorians. Hendricks sighed. Look, I don't care what you're mixed up in, but that facility is locked down tight. 3 security checkpoints, biometric scanners, the works. There's always a way in. Yeah, there is. Maintenance tunnels. They run under the whole complex, but you'd need access codes. Can you get them? Another pause. Maybe, but it'll cost you. Name it. That Terran whiskey you've been hoarding, all of it. Steve grimaced. Done. When he returned inside, he found Livy singing softly to Taro in her native language, a haunting melody that made something twist in his chest. We have a way in, he told her, but we need help with the boy while we're gone. I'm not going alone, and you know the medicine we need. Livy looked torn. I can't leave him. We don't have a choice, Steve said gently, and I know someone who can watch him. An hour later, they stood outside a modest dwelling in the artisan's quarter. The door opened to reveal a human woman in her 50s, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. Steve Lawson, she said, eyebrows raised. Trouble follows you like a shadow. Good to see you too, Doctor. Franklin, the woman's eyes moved to Livy and the bundle in her arms. Come in, quickly. Inside, Dr. Franklin examined Taro with practiced efficiency. Cerulean fever, advanced stage. You need Phylaxian antibiotics in a mineral compound called azurite. Can you help him until we get it? Steve asked. I can keep him stable for a day, maybe 2. She fixed Steve with a stern look. The Central Medical Facility? He nodded. Suicide mission, she muttered, but began preparing a makeshift treatment area. The boy stays here. You two be careful. As they prepared to leave, Livy knelt beside her brother, whispering promises to return. The sight made Steve's resolve harden. We'll be back with the medicine, he assured Dr. Franklin. Keep him safe. Outside, Livy looked up at him, vulnerability and determination warring in her expression. Why are you doing all this? Risking everything for strangers? Steve considered the question. Where I come from, we have a saying. The measure of humanity isn't how we treat our own, but how we treat those who have nothing to offer in return. Is that really a human saying? He grinned. Maybe I just made it up, but it should be. Livy's lips curved into a small smile. Your species continues to surprise me, Steve Lawson. That's what we do best. He checked his weapon, tucked discreetly under his jacket. Now let's go steal some medicine. As they walked toward the central district, Steve felt a strange certainty. He'd known these children for barely a day, yet he was willing to risk everything for them. Perhaps it was madness, or perhaps it was simply being human. The stubborn refusal to accept that some battles couldn't be won. Either way, he was committed now, and Steve Lawson never left a mission unfinished. The maintenance tunnels beneath the central medical facility were dimly lit and smelled of disinfectant and stale air. Steve and Livy moved silently, following the schematics Hendricks had provided. The pharmaceutical storage should be 2 levels up from here, Steve whispered, checking his data pad. There's an access point through the service elevator shaft. Livy nodded, her white hair tucked beneath a dark cap. The maintenance uniform Steve had procured for her was too large, making her appear even more delicate than she was. Yet her eyes were steady, determined. They reached the elevator shaft without incident. Steve pried open the service panel and helped Livy inside before following. The climb was arduous but manageable, and soon they were easing open the doors to the pharmaceutical level. Security is lighter than expected, Steve murmured as they slipped into an empty corridor. Night shift, Livy explained. Most Keldorians require more rest cycles than humans. They located the storage room for specialized medications, but Steve frowned at the security panel. Biometric lock. We need authorized personnel. Before they could devise a solution, footsteps approached from around the corner. Steve pulled Livy into a recessed doorway, pressing her against the wall as he shielded her with his body. A tall figure in a medical officer's uniform walked past their hiding spot, then suddenly stopped. Steve tensed, hand moving to his concealed weapon. The figure turned, revealing a female Phylaxian with striking features, high cheekbones, luminous skin that shifted between turquoise and deeper blue hues, and eyes like liquid silver. Her white hair was elegantly styled, and her uniform bore the insignia of a senior medical officer. I know you're there, she said in a melodious voice. Come out now. Steve stepped forward, keeping Livy behind him. We don't want trouble. The woman's silver eyes widened slightly at the sight of a human. What are you doing in a restricted area? We need Phylaxian antibiotics and azurite compound, Livy said, stepping out from behind Steve. Please, my brother has cerulean fever. Recognition flashed across the woman's face. You're the refugee children everyone's hunting. Her gaze shifted to Steve. And you're helping them. Are you going to report us? Steve asked, tension evident in his stance. To his surprise, she smiled, a dazzling expression that transformed her already beautiful face into something breathtaking. My name is Nerea, she said, and I've been waiting for someone like you. Minutes later, they were inside the pharmaceutical storage room, Nerea efficiently gathering the needed medications. I've been documenting the governor's policies, she explained as she worked. The deliberate withholding of medical care from non-Keldorians, the false claims of contagion to justify deportations. Why risk your position? Steve asked. Nerea's hands paused briefly. My younger sister died last year, denied treatment because she married a non-Phylaxian. Her silver eyes met his. Some things matter more than safety. As she handed over the medicine, their fingers brushed. Steve felt an unexpected jolt of awareness, noticing for the first time the subtle fragrance that surrounded her. Something like night-blooming flowers and warm spice. This should cure your brother, Nerea told Livy, but you can't stay in this settlement. Governor Threll has ordered a purge of all Phylaxian refugees starting tomorrow. A purge, Livy's voice shook. Forced deportation to the mining colonies. Nerea's expression hardened. I'm coming with you. I have evidence that could expose Threll to the Galactic Council, but I need to get it off planet. An alarm suddenly blared through the facility. Someone's detected the unauthorized access, Nerea said urgently. We need to go. Now! They hurried back to the elevator shaft, but security doors were already sealing the corridors. This way, Nerea directed, leading them down a different path. My quarters are nearby. We can access the emergency exit from there. Her private quarters were spacious but sparsely decorated, dominated by a large data terminal. Neria quickly downloaded files onto a secure drive while Steve secured the door. 5 minutes until security overrides the lock, he warned. Neria nodded, finishing her download. As she moved past Steve to gather essential items, their bodies brushed against each other in the confined space. The contact sent an unexpected wave of heat through him, and he caught her quick intake of breath. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Recognition, attraction, a shared understanding of the risks they were taking. "I've never met a human who would risk so much for strangers," Neria said softly. "And I've never met anyone like you," Steve replied, surprised by the roughness in his voice. For a moment, the urgency of their situation receded, replaced by a different kind of tension. Neria stepped closer, her iridescent skin seeming to pulse with inner light. "Phylaxians have a saying," she murmured. "Courage recognizes courage across the stars." The moment was broken by Livy's urgent voice. "The door!" Steve reluctantly pulled away, refocusing on their escape. Neria led them to a concealed panel that opened into a narrow passage. "This leads to the residential district," she explained. "We should separate once we're out. I'll meet you at your safe house in 2 hours." Steve nodded, memorizing the address she provided. As they prepared to enter the passage, Neria suddenly caught his arm, her silver eyes intense. "Thank you," she said simply, "for reminding me that some things are worth fighting for." Before he could respond, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. A brief, electric contact that left him momentarily stunned. Then she was gone, slipping ahead into the darkness of the passage. Steve touched his lips, still feeling the strange, tingling warmth of her kiss, before following with Livy close behind. Dr. Franklin's dwelling was quiet when Steve and Livy arrived with the precious medication. Taro was sleeping fitfully, his fever still raging but stable under the doctor's care. "Just in time, doctor," Franklin said, examining the medicine. "His system is starting to shut down." While she prepared the treatment, Steve paced by the window, watching for Nerea. The streets were eerily empty, the settlement's night curfew in full effect. "She'll come," Livy assured him, noticing his concern. Steve nodded, though worry gnawed at him. The brief connection he'd felt with Nerea lingered like an afterimage, unexpected and powerful. An hour later, a soft knock at the door made them all freeze. Steve drew his weapon and approached cautiously. "Who is it?" he called softly. "A friend who appreciates human courage," came the melodic reply. Relief flooded through him as he opened the door to reveal Nerea, now dressed in the civilian clothing that accentuated her graceful form. Her silver eyes found his immediately, a small smile playing at her lips. "You made it," he said, holstering his weapon. "Barely. The entire medical district is on lockdown." She stepped inside, then tensed as she noticed movement in the shadows behind her. Steve reacted instantly, pulling her behind him as 3 figures emerged from the darkness, Phylaxians dressed in nondescript clothing, their expressions wary. "Medical Officer Nerea," the leader said, a tall male with striking facial markings. "We've been searching for you." "Raylan," Nerea acknowledged. "How did you find me?" "We have our methods," his eyes shifted to Steve. "A human? This complicates matters." "He saved my life," Nerea said firmly, "and he's helping these children." Raylan studied Steve with undisguised suspicion. "The Resistance doesn't trust outsiders." "Then it's fortunate I'm not asking for your trust," Steve replied evenly. The tension was broken by Dr. Franklin emerging from the bedroom. "The boy's responding to the treatment. He'll need another dose in 6 hours." Raylan's demeanor softened slightly at the mention of the sick child. "We heard about the orphans." "That's partly why we came," he turned to Nerea, "but mainly for the evidence. We need it for our contact in the Galactic Council." "I have it," Nerea confirmed, "but we need to get these children to safety first." "That won't be possible," a female resistance member interjected. "Governor Threll has accelerated the purge. It begins at dawn." The news sent a chill through the room. Steve's mind raced through options, none of them good. "We have a transport leaving in 3 hours," Raylan offered. "We can take the children and the doctor." "And Nerea," Steve added. Raylan hesitated. "Our priority is the evidence. Officer Nerea's presence might compromise the mission." "I'm not leaving without her," Steve stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Nerea placed a hand on his arm, the touch sending warmth through his body despite the tense situation. "Steve." "No discussion," he interrupted. "We all go, or none of us do." A tense silence followed before Raylan finally nodded. "Very well, but we move now. Gather only essentials." As the others prepared to leave, Neria pulled Steve into the small kitchen, away from prying eyes. "That was foolish," she said, though her eyes betrayed her true feelings. "You're risking everything for people you barely know." "It's what humans do," he replied with a half smile. "We're stubborn that way." Her expression softened and she moved closer. "Is that all it is? Stubbornness?" The air between them seemed to charge with electricity. Steve found himself acutely aware of her proximity, the subtle shifts of color beneath her iridescent skin, the intoxicating scent that was uniquely hers. "No," he admitted, voice low. "Not all." Her hand rose to his face, fingers tracing the contours of his jaw with wonder. "I've studied human physiology, but never—" She trailed off, her touch sending shivers down his spine. Steve caught her hand in his, turning it to press his lips against her palm. Her sharp intake of breath emboldened him. "We should join the others," she whispered, making no move to pull away. "We should," he agreed, drawing her closer instead. When their lips met, it was like nothing Steve had experienced before, a rush of sensation that seemed to connect them on a level beyond the physical. Her skin emanated a gentle warmth that pulsed in time with her heartbeat, and where they touched, a pleasant tingling sensation spread through his body. Neria responded with surprising intensity, her hands exploring the unfamiliar contours of his shoulders and chest with fascinated desire. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "That was—" she began. "Yeah," he finished, unable to find adequate words. A discreet cough from the doorway made them step apart. Dr. Franklin regarded them with knowing amusement. "If you two are quite finished, we have an evacuation to complete." Neria's skin flushed a deeper blue, but she maintained her composure. "Of course, Doctor." As they rejoined the others, Raylan was outlining the escape route. "We'll take the maintenance tunnels to the spaceport. Our ship is registered as a supply transport." "What about security checkpoints?" Steve asked, forcing his mind back to the task at hand. "We have clearance codes," Raylan replied, still eyeing Steve warily, "but your human appearance will draw attention." "I can handle myself." Livy approached with Taro in her arms, the boy looking marginally better after receiving the medicine. "He's awake," she announced. Steve knelt beside them. "Hey, little man. Feeling better?" Taro nodded weakly. "Are we going on an adventure?" "Something like that," Steve smiled. "Think you can be brave a little longer?" The boy's violet eyes were solemn. "I'm always brave." "Livy says so." "She's right about that." As they prepared to leave, Neria sidled next to Steve, her hand finding his in the dimness. "When this is over," she began softly. "We'll figure it out," he promised, squeezing her hand. The moment was interrupted by the sudden wail of sirens outside, followed by the distinctive whine of security vehicles. "We've been compromised," Rylan hissed, drawing a weapon. Steve moved to the window, cursing under his breath at the sight of Keldorian security forces surrounding the building. "Is there another way out?" he asked Dr. Franklin. "The basement connects to the old water system," she replied, "but they'll have that covered too." Steve's mind shifted into tactical mode, assessing options with military precision. "Then we make our own exit." As the others looked to him for direction, Steve felt the weight of their trust and the fierce determination to prove it well placed. Somehow he would get these people to safety, no matter what it took. Because that's what humans did. They protected their own. And somewhere along the way, these aliens had become exactly that. "We need a diversion," Steve announced, his mind racing through tactical scenarios. "Something to draw them away from the basement exit." Raylan shook his head. "They've got the building surrounded. We'd need something major to pull them off position." "Exactly." Steve's expression hardened with resolve. "I'll create a distraction on the east side. Once they move to intercept, the rest of you slip out through the water system." "That's suicide," Neria protested, her silver eyes flashing with concern. "Not if I time it right." Steve checked his weapon. "I know this settlement better than they think. I can lose them in the industrial sector and circle back to the spaceport." Dr. Franklin nodded approvingly. "The maintenance tunnels by the refinery connect directly to the spaceport service area. It could work." It's too risky, Neria insisted, stepping closer to Steve. Let one of the resistance members go. Raylan's expression remained impassive. The human's right. They'll be looking for Phylaxians, not a lone human worker. The logic was sound, but Neria still looked unconvinced. Steve took her hands in his, struck again by the warmth that seemed to flow between them at every contact. I'll meet you at docking bay 12, he promised. 2 hours maximum. Their eyes locked in silent communication, volumes passing between them without words. Finally she nodded, though reluctance showed in every line of her body. 2 hours, she repeated, not a minute more. Steve turned to Livy, who watched him with wide, frightened eyes. Take care of your brother. Do exactly what Dr. Franklin and Neria tell you. You'll come back? The girl asked, her voice small. Count on it. He ruffled her white hair gently. I still need that sandwich you owe me. This earned him a tremulous smile. The plan came together quickly. Steve would exit through an upper window, creating enough noise to draw attention, while the others slipped into the basement. Dr. Franklin provided a small explosive device, for medical emergencies only, she claimed with a wink. That would serve as the primary distraction. As the others made final preparations, Neria pulled Steve into the hallway, her expression intense. I need to say something, she began, her voice low and urgent. In case... Don't, he interrupted. I'm coming back. Humans and your stubborn certainty. A smile ghosted across her lips. It's infuriating and strangely compelling. Before he could respond, she pressed against him, her mouth finding his with desperate intensity. The kiss was different from their earlier ones, deeper, more urgent, filled with unspoken emotions and possibilities. When they parted, her skin had darkened to a rich indigo that seemed to pulse with inner light. That's a promise, she whispered. Fulfill your end of the bargain, Steve Lawson. Yes, ma'am, he replied, his voice rougher than intended. Minutes later, Steve was positioned at an upper window, the small explosive device secured to a drainage pipe on the opposite side of the building. Raylan gave the signal. Everyone was in position. Steve triggered the device. The explosion wasn't large, but in the quiet of the settlement's night, it sounded like thunder. Security forces immediately responded, vehicles and personnel converging on the east side of the building. Steve seized his moment, smashing through the window in a shower of glass and dropping to a lower roof. Shouts erupted as he was spotted, and the chase began. He ran with calculated recklessness, making himself an obvious target while ensuring he maintained just enough lead to avoid capture. Behind him, he heard the security forces mobilizing, exactly as he'd hoped. Away from the building, away from the others. Steve navigated the settlement's maze-like streets with the precision of someone who'd studied them carefully. Each turn, each shortcut was deliberate, leading his pursuers on a wild chase that drew more and more resources away from Dr. Franklin's dwelling. Blaster fire sizzled past his ear as he ducked into an alley. Too close. He needed to disappear soon or risk actual capture. The industrial sector loomed ahead, its massive processing plants and refineries creating a labyrinth of pipes, tanks, and maintenance corridors. Perfect for losing pursuit. Steve slipped between two massive storage tanks, then down into a drainage channel that ran beneath the refinery. The acrid smell of chemicals burned his nostrils, but he pushed forward, hearing the confused shouts of his pursuers growing more distant. For 20 minutes, he navigated the underbelly of the industrial sector, moving steadily toward the spaceport. The sounds of pursuit had faded entirely when he finally emerged from a maintenance hatch near the cargo loading area. The spaceport was on high alert, security personnel checking identification at every entrance. Steve observed from the shadows, calculating his options. His comm unit vibrated, a message from an unknown source. Bay 12, maintenance entrance, code 4872. Neria. She'd found a way to contact him. Moving with casual confidence, Steve approached a service door near the maintenance bays. The code worked, granting him access to a narrow corridor that led toward the docking areas. He was halfway to Bay 12 when a security patrol rounded the corner ahead. No time to hide. Steve straightened, adopting the weary posture of a maintenance worker finishing a long shift. ID, the lead officer demanded. Steve produced his work credentials. Night shift at the refinery. Just finished. The officer examined the ID with suspicious eyes. There's an alert for a human matching your description. Yeah, Steve feigned confusion. What did he do? Harboring illegal aliens. Interference with security operations. Steve shrugged. Sounds like an idiot. Look, I'm just trying to get home. Been pulling double shifts all week. The officer hesitated, then handed back the ID. Move along, but stay in the authorized areas. Yes, sir. Steve continued down the corridor, maintaining his tired worker act until the patrol was out of sight. Then he quickened his pace. Bay 12 was a small cargo dock, currently occupied by an unmarked transport vessel. Steve approached cautiously, scanning for security. A side hatch opened, and Neria's face appeared, relief washing over her features. You made it. Told you I would. He slipped inside where the others waited anxiously. Livy immediately rushed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. You came back. Always keep my promises, Steve said, returning the hug before looking to Raylan. Status? Pre-flight checks complete. We're ready for departure. Any problems? None. There was newfound respect in the resistance leader's eyes. Your diversion worked perfectly. Neria hadn't moved from Steve's side, her hand finding his as if drawn by magnetic force. You're injured, she noted, touching a cut on his forehead he hadn't even noticed. It's nothing. Her fingers lingered on his skin. We need to talk. After. The promise in those words sent heat through his body, despite the danger still surrounding them. After, he agreed. As the transport's engines hummed to life, Steve felt a strange sense of rightness. 2 days ago, his life had been simple and solitary. Now he was fleeing the planet with 2 alien children, resistance fighters, and a woman who made his heart race with a single glance. And somehow it all made perfect sense. The transport ship slipped into hyperspace with a subtle lurch, leaving the Keldorian system behind in a streak of distorted starlight. The tension that had gripped everyone during their escape gradually dissipated, replaced by cautious relief. We're clear, Raylan announced from the pilot's seat. No pursuit detected. Steve exhaled slowly, the adrenaline that had sustained him beginning to ebb. Beside him, Neria's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. Where are we headed? He asked. Phylaxian outpost in the Meridian sector, Raylan replied. Small but secure. We have allies there who can help get the evidence to the Galactic Council. Taro had fallen asleep in Livy's arms, his condition improving steadily with each dose of medicine. Dr. Franklin monitored him closely, her experienced eyes noting every positive change. The fever's breaking, she informed them. He'll make a full recovery. Livy's eyes shimmered with grateful tears. Thank you. All of you. As the others settled in for the journey, Steve found himself drawn to the small viewport, watching the hypnotic patterns of hyperspace. Neria joined him, her presence a comforting warmth at his side. Having second thoughts? She asked softly. About leaving? No, he turned to face her. Everything happened so fast, I haven't had time to process it all. Her silver eyes studied him with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beyond his surface. You left your life behind, your job, your possessions. Nothing I can't replace. His hand rose to her face, fingers tracing the delicate contours of her cheekbone. Some things matter more. The intensity in her eyes deepened as she leaned into his touch. Steve. Their moment was interrupted by the ship's communication system blaring to life. Raylan's voice was tight with concern. Everyone to the command deck, now! They found him staring at a transmission screen, his expression grim. On the display, a Keldorian official was making an announcement, the settlement's central plaza visible in the background. In response to the theft of sensitive medical materials and the harboring of illegal aliens, Governor Threll has ordered the detention of all human residents until the fugitives are apprehended. The human Steve Lawson and his accomplices are to surrender immediately, or further measures will be taken against the human settlement. The screen showed rows of human workers being processed by security forces, their expressions confused and frightened. They're using your people as leverage, Raylan said, turning to Steve. Threll must be desperate to recover Neria's evidence. Steve felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. He recognized faces in that crowd, co-workers, acquaintances, innocent people being punished for his actions. We have to do something, he said, his voice hardening with resolve. Like what? One of the resistance fighters challenged. Turn ourselves in? Threll would execute us all and destroy the evidence. No, Steve agreed. But we can't abandon those people either. Neria's hand tightened around his. The evidence is our priority. Once the council sees it, how long will that take? Steve interrupted. Days, weeks. Those people don't have that kind of time. A heavy silence fell over the command deck. Finally, Doctor, Franklin spoke up. There might be another way. The evidence doesn't need all of us to deliver it. Just someone the council will listen to. All eyes turned to Neria, whose position as a medical officer gave her testimony credibility. I could continue to the council with Raylan and the evidence, she said slowly, understanding where this was heading. While I go back for the hostages, Steve finished. That's suicide, Raylan protested. Not necessarily. Steve's tactical mind was already formulating a plan. If I surrender myself, Threll would have to release the other humans. It's me he wants. And once he has you, he'll execute you, Neria said, her voice tight with emotion. Not if you've already reached the council. He wouldn't dare once an investigation is underway. The logic was sound, but the risk enormous. Everyone knew it. I'm going with you, Livy announced suddenly. Absolutely not, Steve and Neria said in unison. The young girl's sapphire eyes flashed with determination. The governor doesn't know I can identify his chief medical officer, the one who denied treatment to Phylaxians. I heard my parents talking before they died. I have testimony too. It's too dangerous, Steve insisted. No more dangerous than what you're planning, she countered with surprising maturity, and Threll won't harm a child in front of witnesses. It would undermine his claim that he's protecting the settlement. Steve looked to Dr. Franklin, who nodded reluctantly. The girl has a point, and Taro should continue to the council with Neria. His condition is evidence of the medical discrimination. The plan took shape. Neria, Taro, and part of the resistance would continue to the Galactic Council with the evidence, while Steve, Livy, and Dr. Franklin would return to negotiate the release of the human hostages. As the others made preparations for the ship to drop them at a nearby trading post where they could secure transport back to the settlement, Steve and Neria found themselves alone in a small cargo bay. This isn't how I imagined our journey would continue, she said, her voice thick with emotion. It's temporary, he assured her, drawing her close. Once the council acts, we'll find each other again. Promise me you'll be careful. Her hands framed his face, her skin pulsing with waves of deep blue that betrayed her emotional state. Promise me you'll come back to me. Instead of answering with words, Steve kissed her with all the passion and promise he could convey. What followed was a discovery of each other, tender, urgent, a claiming of something precious that might be lost. Their bodies spoke what words couldn't express, finding a harmony that transcended their different species. Afterward, they lay entwined, her iridescent skin glowing softly in the dimness. In Phylaxian culture, she murmured against his chest, what we just shared is considered a bond that not even death can break. Steve smiled, stroking her white hair. Humans have similar ideas. Then we're already in agreement. She raised herself to look into his eyes. Find me when this is over, Steve Lawson. No matter what happens, find me. Count on it, he promised, sealing the vow with another kiss. Hours later, as they prepared to part ways, Steve watched Neria board the section of the ship that would continue to the council. Taro, now awake and much improved, waved from her arms. We'll see you soon, the boy called, his innocent certainty a balm to the ache of separation. As their vessels diverged, Steve turned to Livy and Dr. Franklin, his expression resolute. Let's go save some humans. The settlement's central plaza was packed with onlookers when Steve, Livy, and Dr. Franklin arrived. Security forces formed a perimeter around a makeshift stage where Governor Threll stood addressing the crowd, his tall Keldorian frame draped in ceremonial robes that emphasized his authority. The human fugitive Steve Lawson has committed crimes against our settlement, Threll's amplified voice boomed. His actions have endangered us all. Behind him, a group of human workers stood under guard, their expressions a mixture of confusion and fear. Steve recognized his foreman and several co-workers among them. It's time, he murmured to his companions. Dr. Franklin nodded grimly. Remember, stall as long as possible. The council transmission should reach here within the hour. Steve straightened his shoulders and stepped forward. Livy at his side. They moved deliberately through the crowd, which parted instinctively before them. A murmur rippled through the gathered aliens as they recognized the fugitives. "Governor Threll," Steve called out, his voice carrying across the plaza. "I believe you're looking for me." The governor's speech faltered as he spotted Steve. Security personnel immediately moved to intercept, weapons drawn. "Hold!" Threll commanded, raising a hand. His thin lips curved into a satisfied smile. "Steve Lawson, how considerate of you to surrender." "I'm not surrendering," Steve replied, continuing forward until he stood at the foot of the stage. "I'm here to negotiate the release of those innocent workers." Threll's eyes narrowed. "You are in no position to negotiate, human." "Aren't I?" Steve climbed the steps to the stage, ignoring the weapons trained on him. "These people have done nothing wrong. Your quarrel is with me. And the Phylaxian fugitives you helped escape," Threll added, his gaze shifting to Livy, who had followed Steve onto the stage. "You mean the sick child you denied medicine to?" Steve challenged, his voice loud enough for the crowd to hear. "The orphans whose parents died because of your discriminatory policies?" A ripple of discomfort passed through the onlookers. Several Keldorians exchanged troubled glances. "Lies," Threll hissed. "Propaganda spread by Phylaxian agitators." "Then why did your chief medical officer falsify records?" Livy spoke up, her young voice clear and steady. "I heard my parents talking before they died. They knew what was happening." Threll's composure slipped momentarily. The ramblings of a child proved nothing. "Perhaps not," Steve agreed, "but the evidence Neria took to the Galactic Council will prove everything." The governor's face darkened with rage. "Seize them," he ordered his guards. As security forces moved forward, a commotion erupted at the edge of the plaza. A group of Keldorians pushed through the crowd, led by a distinguished elder whose ornate clothing marked him as a person of importance. "Governor Threll," the elder called out, "this assembly must cease immediately." "Elder Coven," Threll acknowledged stiffly, "this is an internal security matter." "It is now a council matter," Coven replied, ascending the stage. He held up a datapad displaying an official seal. "I have just received an emergency communication from the Galactic Council. They have ordered an immediate investigation into allegations of species discrimination and medical malpractice in this settlement." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, growing louder as the implications sank in. "The evidence has been received, as Doctor," Franklin whispered to Steve. "Nuria did it." Relief flooded through him, followed by fierce pride. She had succeeded. Threll's face contorted with fury. "This is absurd. We cannot allow the Council to interfere in our governance based on the testimony of criminals and fugitives." "The testimony," Elder Coven continued implacably, "comes from Medical Officer Neria, whose credentials and integrity are beyond reproach, and it is supported by extensive documentation." As Threll sputtered in protest, something unexpected happened. One of the human hostages stepped forward. Hendricks, Steve's contact, who had provided the facility schematics. "Governor," Hendricks said loudly, "the human workers have something to say." Before Threll could object, Hendricks turned to address the crowd. "For years, we humans have worked alongside Keldorians, building this settlement together. We've respected your laws and customs, but we cannot stand by while innocent children are denied medical care because of their species." A chorus of agreement rose from the other human workers. Then, to Steve's astonishment, several Keldorians in the crowd stepped forward to join them. "My neighbor was Phylaxian," one called out. "They disappeared last month after seeking treatment at the medical facility." "My business partner too," added another. More voices joined in, a cascade of testimonies that had been suppressed by fear until this moment. Elder Coven turned to Threll, whose face had drained of color. "It seems, Governor, that your policies have affected more than just Phylaxians." "This is insurrection," Threll snarled. "Guards, restore order." But the security forces hesitated, looking uncertainly between their governor and the growing number of citizens speaking out against him. In that moment of indecision, the plaza's communication screens flickered to life, displaying the insignia of the Galactic Council. The crowd fell silent as a council representative appeared. "Attention citizens of the Keldorian settlement. The Council has reviewed evidence of serious violations of galactic law regarding equal treatment of sentient species. Governor Threll is hereby suspended, pending a full investigation. Elder Coven will assume temporary authority." The screen shifted to show Neria standing before the council, Taro healthy and alert in her arms. Steve's heart swelled at the sight of them. Furthermore, the council representative continued, all detained individuals are to be released immediately. A council delegation will arrive within 24 hours to begin proceedings. The transmission ended, leaving a stunned silence that quickly erupted into a cacophony of voices. Elder Coven moved swiftly to take control, ordering the release of the human workers and the detention of Governor Threll, who was led away in shocked disbelief. In the chaos that followed, Steve found himself surrounded by grateful humans and curious Keldorians. Livy stayed close to his side, her small hand clutching his. "What happens now?" she asked. Steve smiled down at her. "Now we wait for Neria and Taro to come home." 3 days later, Steve stood in the spaceport's arrival area, watching as the council ship docked. His heart pounded with anticipation. When the hatch opened and Neria appeared with Taro, it took all his restraint not to run to them. Taro had no such inhibitions. The moment he spotted Steve and Livy, he broke free from Neria's grasp and raced toward them, his small turquoise face alight with joy. "Steve!" he cried, launching himself into the human's arms. Steve caught him, laughing as he swung the boy in a circle. "Looking good, little man." Livy joined the embrace, and for a moment, the three of them formed a perfect tableau of reunion. Then Neria was there, her silver eyes shimmering with emotion. Without hesitation, Steve pulled her into the embrace, his lips finding hers in a kiss that spoke volumes about the days of separation. "Welcome home," he murmured against her mouth. "Home," she repeated, as if testing the word. "Yes, I suppose it is now." Later, as they walked through the settlement, now under Elder Coven's progressive leadership, Neria explained the council's decision. Threll will face trial for his actions. The council has appointed a mixed-species governance committee to oversee reforms. She squeezed Steve's hand. "They've asked me to head the new medical administration." "And the children?" he asked, and her smile was radiant. "The council has granted us joint guardianship, if you're willing." Steve stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Are you asking me to start a family with you, Doctor?" "I believe we already have," she replied, glancing at Livy and Taro, who were exploring a nearby vendor's stall. "I'm merely suggesting we make it official." Steve pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him, despite their different species. "In that case, my answer is yes." As they sealed the agreement with a kiss, Steve reflected on the strange path that had led him here. A stolen sandwich, a desperate child, a corrupt governor, a courageous medical officer. And somehow, out of that chaos, he'd found something he hadn't even known he was looking for. A family. Livy approached, tugging at his sleeve. "Steve, the vendor is selling sandwiches. Real Earth ones, like you had before." He laughed, remembering where it all began. "Well then, I think you owe me one, don't you?" Her sapphire eyes twinkled with mischief. "I suppose I do." As they walked toward the stall together, human, Phylaxian, adults and children, bound by choice rather than species, Steve felt a profound sense of rightness. Sometimes, he thought, the heart finds its home in the most unexpected places.